This is a little bit more information you need to know about Adobe Illustrator to be able to complete the single page layout exercise. And so we haven't really dealt with type at all in Illustrator, and so this project is going to actually be a lost pet flyer. So you're going to get a chance to use some of your own images and add your own type. You're going to generate the content. It can be a real or a fictional pet. You just need to have some type and some images, and you need to add some color. You can use line, use all the different tools that you have been introduced to up until this point to create this flyer. And so I'm going to show you a few other things that you're going to need to know and go about the process I might use to build a flyer like this. So I'm going to create a new document, and our document is going to be 8.5 by 11. And an 8.5 by 11 page is a standard print page. So I'm going to go here to print, and your dialog box might look a little bit different if you're in an older version. But a letter is 8.5 by 11 size. And so if you notice here, I'm in points. I can change this to inches. So 8.5 by 11. So I'm going to hit create. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to add all the elements that might be important for a lost pet flyer. So one of the first things might be an image of the pet. So I'm going to actually do one for my dog. His name is Shep, and I'm going to go to place. I'm going to find an image of him that I've got here on this flash drive, and got some pictures here of Shep. And we'll look, and I'm going to hit space on the keyboard. Okay, that one's a pretty good one. Let's see, find one that one's, people won't want to find him. That one's kind of gross. Let's see here. Find one in all his, oh, that one's pretty good. Let's see. Let's do this one. He kind of looks like Gandalf the Grey when he comes back over the mountain. So we're going to use this one, and I'm going to click and drag to place this image. Now, some of the content that you might want to add, obviously, are lost pet or lost dog. And so this is where we can start to add some type. So if you look in your toolbar over here, this T is the symbol for your type tool. So if I click on that, and then I click once on my palette, if you notice, and this also kind of depends on if you're in the newest version of Illustrator, if you're back a version. The newest version will actually auto-populate where you clicked with a lorem ipsum in that space. If not, it'll just be a flashing cursor here. But this is where my text is. And so if you notice, you can click and drag and highlight it just like in Word. If I double click, it will highlight one word. I triple click, it'll highlight a whole line. Or I can do Command A while I've got it selected, and it'll select all of the text. So I'm going to type in lost dog here. Now, I can select that type, and I can change the size of that type, and I can change the weight of or the typeface. And there's a couple of different ways that I can do that. With your type selected, if you notice, this toolbar actually changed a little bit, and it's got a character where you can choose the typeface, you can choose the size, and so you can choose through some of these different typefaces, and I can choose a variation of that. I can choose the size, so here's some default sizes, or I can use the up and down arrow, or I can actually type in a number here and hit tab, and it'll tab over to the next one. If you want, you can also open up a palette over here. And if you don't see the palette on this right hand side, you can always go to view, it's window, and then we want to go to type and then character, and that will give us this character palette that has these same options. You can also click on this hyperlink right here, and it'll show those exact same options. So if I say show here, so if you notice that, and then I click on this hyperlink, that's the exact same options. So I can make this type whatever size I want. I can also spread out what's known as the letter spacing. So if you notice the type starts to get a little bit further apart, or you can tighten it up. You can also change the type by stretching it, but this right here, I'm not even sure why these are even an option. This is a type crime. Do not ever distort type. You can see that if you click and drag on your type, it starts to distort it, and these numbers are not both 100%. Those numbers should always be 100%. So don't distort your type. So another way that you can start to modify this text, and it's probably my preferred method, it's just like a quick way to start to size things. If you hold Shift and Command and then do the less than sign, which is next to the M on the keyboard, you can shrink that type down really quickly. Or if you do the greater than sign, which is right next to that, it's by the question mark. I'm holding Shift and Command. It's a quick way for you to size your text up and down. Now, if I hit Escape on the keyboard, it's going to actually go back to my regular selection tool. And if you notice, this type is actually on what's known as a path. So it's got a starting point. That's where my text is starting, and everything's oriented based off of that point. And then it keeps going, and it'll keep going indefinitely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to shrink it down a little bit, and then I'm going to keep typing. And if you notice, it's just going to keep going on till infinity, until I hit a return on the keyboard, and that'll kick it down to that next line. Now, I'm just going to hit some spaces in here so that it'll break it up like they are words. And I'm going to make this type a little bit smaller here. Now this is all on a path, and the only reason it's kicking down is because there is a hard return at the end. Now the other way that you can add text is, instead of just clicking and having it be on a path, you can actually create what's known as a text area. So I'm going to copy this text here, and I'm going to get my type tool, and instead of clicking once, I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to designate an area for that type to go in. And so if you notice, it fills with text there. I can paste my other text in there, and I can remove those hard returns at the end. And so if you see, instead of having it start to distort the type, so if I click and drag on this one, because it's on a path, it's actually adjusting the width of that type. This one's actually adjusting that text area. So you can change it, and you can make multiple columns of text. So as you're starting to add content to your flyer, if you find that you are doing a lot of hard returns to space things out, it's probably best that you actually create separate text portions that are on a path. So I might take this, and I'm going to actually copy this by holding the Option key. And if you remember, if you hold the Option key, it will make a copy when you click and drag. And I'm going to change this text and make it all capitals. So I could click here in my character palette, and I'm going to make this larger. And if you notice, it's around this orientation. I'm going to change where it is, and I'm going to change it to a centered orientation. And then if you notice, this point has changed from that far left hand side to the center area. I'm going to put this content, maybe I'm going to put this in like a black area, so it has a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to get a regular text box, and I'm going to take that text box, and I'm going to send this to the back, and I'm going to use the keystroke Command left bracket, and then I'm going to click and drag across that. And if you notice, I've got my type and my box selected. And then if I hold Shift and click on just the box, just my type will remain selected. And I'm going to fill that with white. and do Shift Command right bracket, and it'll bring that to the front. So I've got this content here, and we're going to put his name, Shep. And some other content that I might want to put, he's a white Maltipoo, and yes, that is a real thing. And then I'm going to put 6 pounds. Okay, and then you can resize the image. Perhaps maybe I want to move this to the side. Think about the orientation. So I clicked and dragged across both of these, and I'm going to move that up. Maybe I'll have this go all the way to the outside edges here. I've got my picture. Mm, 6 pounds. Some other content I may want to put on this, and this is totally up to you if you want to add some additional content, but perhaps I want to put my phone number, and this is not my phone number, but I want it to be a real looking phone number, so don't just put 555. Put some real looking numbers. And then maybe this needs to be in a color. You can add color. Perhaps we want this to be in a different shape. So I've got, right now, this image is this square shape. And let's say I wanted this to be oriented so it is a horizontal orientation. Now, what I can do is I can actually create a clipping mask around this image, whichever shape that I want. So I'm going to actually draw a rectangle, and let's say that's where I want to crop it to, is right there. And then what I do is I select both that shape, and I hold Shift, so I've got the image selected, so I've got both of them selected, and I can go under Object, Clipping Mask, Make, or it's Command 7 on the keyboard. And if you notice, what it does is it crops it. That content is still there. So if I get my direct selection tool and click in the middle, then I can select just that image. And so you can kind of see I'm going to click just on this edge here, and I'm going to add a color to that edge so you can see that the edge of that image. And I want to make this a little bit thicker so you can see it, so I can go over here to my line or my stroke box. And so now what you can see is if I click with my direct selection tool, I can move this image inside that clipping mask. Now let's say I wanted to do something where maybe it was a circle or a different shape, so I'm going to select that object, and I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, and I'm going to release that, and so it'll break those two things apart. And I could get, sorry, I clicked on the shape builder tool. I could get an ellipse, and let's say I wanted to do a circle, and I wanted to put him in the middle of this circle. So I can select both of those, do Command 7, and it's got a clipping mask. Or let's say, because I really like my dog a lot and I want to pull on those heartstrings, I could maybe use my pen tool and I can draw myself a heart shape. This is a bad heart shape. I've got to fix some of those points, and I'm just holding the Option on the keyboard and the Command to swap back and forth between some of those tools. So let's say I want to put a heart shape here, and then I select both of them and then Command 7, and he's in this shape. So feel free to add lines, shapes. You can put multiple pictures if you'd like. Some lost pet flyers, maybe they have, I'll put my name here, call Rachel, and then I've got my phone number. And then I'm gonna resize that. Now, I actually spread that text out, if you notice. And the way that you can spread that text out is if you hold the Option key with the text selected and do the left or the right arrow. So that's the left. It'll change that spacing, that letter spacing. The right will space that out a little bit. So then I can have this text. And you know how some of those flyers have the little tear off sheets at the bottom strips? So what I can do is I can take this and I'm going to rotate this. And the way I can rotate it is if it's all selected, if you notice, if you go right around this upper corner, it'll change it into a little double arrow. And if I click and drag, it'll let me rotate it. But I want to rotate it so it's exactly perpendicular. I think that's the word. So I'm going to hold this Shift key down and I'm going to rotate it and it'll snap into that 90-degree orientation. And then I can take this and then I can hold my Shift and Option key so it'll make a copy of it and it'll make sure it doesn't go up or down from it. It'll stay in line with that. And then I can hit Command D, which is transform again. So if you go to Object, Transform, Transform again, or Command D, I can duplicate that over to make my little strips here. I probably want to actually make that a little bit smaller. So I delete those. I'm going to hold the Shift key down to size this down. And I'm going to actually group these together. So if you right click, and let's see, where is group? Maybe I already have them grouped. Nope, I don't have them grouped. Let's see, have to have them both selected. Right click, arrange, nope. Where's group? I thought group was here. All right, so I normally wouldn't do it that way. I would do Command G on the keyboard. So maybe just do Command G on the keyboard or go under Object, Group, or Ungroup. Maybe they moved it out of the right click. Anyways, so I've got these grouped together and I'm going to hold Shift, Option to duplicate it. And then I'm going to do Command D as transform again. And then I've got my strips here. Maybe I want to put a line here, so I'm going to get my line segment tool and I'm going to click and drag, and if you notice it's not staying in a straight line, so if I hold Shift it will stay in a straight line. And right now it doesn't have any sort of attribute, it's just a line. It doesn't have any color or stroke width, so I'm going to give it a color. And I'm going to make this stroke, we'll leave it 1 point, we'll make it gray. But I want to make that a dashed line so that it looks like it's something that can be cut off. So I'm going to select that line, and if you notice here I can click on this hyperlink and it'll give me some stroke options. The same options are over here, so if I click and drag this palette out and on this upper right hand corner show options, it'll give me these same options. So there's multiple ways you can do it. Whatever you want to do, you can do. But then what I can do is I can make it a dashed line by clicking this checkbox, and I can decide how much space I want between those lines. And then I've got a dashed line. And then what I could do is I could click and drag. And if you notice, they start to incrementally not be the exact spacing, so it probably would have been better for me to take this. I'm going to delete these and to select these all together and then duplicate them across. So now I've got my little tear strips here. And then maybe I want to put a date. Lost at let's see, St. George Dog Park on January 15th. He is mean. approach with caution. And if you notice, my type is going outside of this area because I actually did a type on a path. And so what I want to do is I want to put that in an area. And it used to be that you would have to copy and paste that into a new text area, but they've added this little feature right here. So if I double click on that area, it will convert it to a text area instead of path. And then I can click and drag that text area. Now, if I don't click on that and I click and drag, it actually distorts that type, which is never do that. So I'm going to double click on it, and then I can change this text area, make it a little bit smaller. So maybe this needs to be a little bit smaller for my text. Let's see. And then you can start to arrange that content. And maybe I need to have another picture. We'll put another picture in one of his more glorious moments. Here's one. We'll click and drag an image there. So you can start to add whatever content you think would be appropriate. And you can add different shapes. Maybe you want to put a little phone here for the call. And it can be on whatever you want to do. But the main thing is to explore different type, different sizes, put different text areas, and what that orientation would be for this type of project. Hopefully that'll give you enough information about type. And actually, you know what? There's one other thing that I want to introduce you to with type. So let's say that we've got this type right here. And I'm just going to move over to this side. Right now, this type is referring to the actual letter forms, LOST, DOG, and the typeface. One thing that you might want to do is you might want to take your type and make it into a shape. And the way you can do that is you can actually convert that type to outlines, and then you can start to modify that type. So the way that you would do that is with your text selected. If you go to type, create outlines, and I'm going to show you what that difference is. If you notice it actually has all these different letter forms outlined with the points and lines. So I'm going to click and drag up across both of these with the direct selection tool. And if you notice, here are these individual points, and then this is still on the path. And so the power of that is now I can take this type and I can select certain portions of it, and I can start to modify that type. So if you want to do something that's a little bit more custom, let's say we want to pull some of those shapes out, that might be something that you might be interested in exploring. When you do create outlines, it does group all of that text together that you've created outlines for. So what you can do is if you double click on it, it will do what's known as drilling down within that group and isolate, or I guess it's called isolation mode, just that one letter form, and you can move just that one letter form. And if you notice right here, it creates this gray bar across the top within that group, and you can just click on that arrow and back out. Another thing that you can do is, or you can hit escape on the keyboard, is you can ungroup these objects. So if I right click on it and click on ungroup and then deselect and click back, this is actually separate from that group. And if you wanted, you could take one of these shapes. So let's say I take this shape and I come back over here and put it on this picture. And then I can take this and select the image in the background, do Command 7, and because it is a vector shape, so it's not thinking about it as a letter D, it's just thinking about these individual points and the curves or the Bezier curves between those points. And one thing to remember is once you've created outlines, you can't go back. You can undo until you save, but you can't ever get that text back. So I typically will make a copy of the text and keep that off to the side on my pasteboard. Okay, so I think that's everything with type. Good luck, and we'll see what kind of lost pet flyers you come up with. Thanks.